The reality-warping nature of Crisis on Infinite Earths brings up loads of questions about not only the Arrowverse, but the worlds beyond the CW series. Some of these questions may be answered in the coming months, but some may never be answered at all. The first 3 parts of Crisis bring some incredible cameos, but the one that lit the internet on fire was saved for Part 4. Ezra Miller, who appears as the Flash in 2017's Justice League, comes face to face with Grant Gustin's CW version of the character as the latter is traveling through the Speed Force. Neither of them have any idea of how the meeting is possible, and the movie Flash in particular seems completely oblivious, though the pair get a somewhat awkward moment appreciating each other's costumes. As the TV Flash says, this shouldn't be able to happen. At this point, the multiverse has been annihilated by the antimatter wave. So if the DCEU films are meant to take place in the same multiverse as the Arrowverse, the movie Flash should be wiped out along with the rest of that Earth's heroes.
You've been gone for months.
What are you talking about? I just left 2 seconds ago.
One possible explanation is that time in the Speed Force doesn't work the same way as it does on Earth. We've already seen this as the case in previous seasons of The Flash. So as confusing as it may seem, it could be the movie Flash entered the Speed Force before the multiverse's death, and the Force's strange relationship with time is allowing him to meet the TV Flash after the end of all things. One of the coolest things about Crisis on Infinite Earths is the reprisal of Brandon Routh in the role of Superman. In earlier chapters of Crisis, he plays the Superman of Earth 96, who is largely based on the 1996 miniseries Kingdom Come. Routh's Earth 96 Superman has earned some grey hairs, and his costume insignia incorporates the color black, something uncommon for the character outside of Kingdom Come. He's killed by Lex Luthor at the end of Crisis Part 3, but by the end of the event, we learn the restoration of the multiverse has resurrected the hero. During the resolution of Crisis Part 5, we see snapshots of other corners of the multiverse, including Earth 96. We find a smiling Superman flying in orbit over the Earth. Interestingly, his costume has changed. The black of his trademark insignia has been replaced with yellow, and overall his costume looks much more like the one Routh wore in 2006's Superman Returns. We don't know if the change is a conscious choice on Superman's part or a result of the changes in the multiverse. One possibility is that it's meant to signify the character has found some peace. When he's asked about the black in the costume earlier in Crisis, he says it symbolizes that there's hope even in the darkest of times. Perhaps this version of the Man of Steel no longer finds himself in the darkest of times, and decided to let it show. Oliver Queen dies a second time at the end of Crisis Part 4, and this one might just stick. With the powers of the Spectre, Queen dies battling the Anti-Monitor and helping to restore the multiverse. His sacrifice is lamented by all the heroes in Part 5, and the President of the United States calls for a moment of silence in honor of his deeds. Even if we accept this is finally the end of a character who has already died and come back multiple times in the history of the Arrowverse, we're left with the question of what's happened to Spectre. We don't know a lot about the Arrowverse's version of the Spectre. He's introduced in Crisis Part 3 when James Corrigan approaches Oliver Queen in Purgatory about acting as the spirit's new host, and by Part 4, Oliver has assumed his new role. In the comics, the Spectre is a physical embodiment of the wrath of God, and one of the most powerful superheroes of DC. If the Spectre of the CW is similar to that of the comics, the death of Oliver Queen would likely not mean the death of the Spectre. But instead, the spirit would need a new host. So did the Spectre find one? Did it go back to James Corrigan? Or is it possible Oliver isn't dead, and will continue to act as a Spectre in the shadows? Crisis Part 3 introduces us to Ryan Choi, the paragon of humanity. He's one of the only paragons to be introduced in Crisis, at least as far as the Arrowverse is concerned, but DC Comics readers are more familiar with the name. Choi famously replaces Ray Palmer as a shrinking hero Atom in the all-new Atom comic series. While Choi's solo series didn't last, he remained a hero in the DC universe, most recently being recruited into an eccentric Justice League of America lineup that included the reformed villain Killer Frost and the alien bounty hunter Lobo. His appearance naturally had fans wondering if he'd be joining the superpowered club by the end of Crisis, but Part 5 concludes without Choi obtaining any shrinking powers or a suit of armor similar to Ray Palmer's.
This definitely makes me question again why I'm here.
But that doesn't mean Choi couldn't play a larger role in the Arrowverse's future, and possibly as another version of the Atom. As soon as we meet him in Crisis, he makes it clear he's familiar with Ray Palmer's scientific breakthroughs, and it's Choi who comes up with the idea of making a device that will neutralize the Anti-Monitor by making him shrink infinitely. Whether or not this is a sign of things to come, only time will tell. Crisis Part 5 ends with the multiverse restored, but not exactly as it used to be. The various heroes of the different CW Arrowverse series existed on a few separate Earths before Crisis, and they now share the same world, Earth Prime.
And it's normal to see us together?
Well, normally you'd also have Green Arrow and a legend or two.
But what about the rest of the multiverse? We don't revisit Earth 89, where we see Robert Wall reprise the role of intrepid Batman hunting reporter Alexander Knox. We don't get another visit with the Robin of Earth 66, and we don't see the fate of Earth 167, where the events of Smallville take place. It's likely we won't see most of those worlds again in the Arrowverse series, and really, that's okay. What could have an impact on the Arrowverse going forward are some of the alternate Earths we visited before Crisis. For example, there's Earth X, where the CW heroes put a dent in the Nazi ruling faction in the 2017 crossover Crisis on Earth X, and made it easier for the Raid to go back home and take them out for good. Or what about Earth 90, which was destroyed as part of the 2018 crossover Elseworlds? Was the Barry Allen of the 90s Flash show resurrected as part of the multiverse's restoration? In Crisis Part 3, Constantine, Diggle, and Mia travel to Earth 666 as part of their quest to resurrect Oliver Queen. There, we meet Tom Ellis's Lucifer Morningstar from the series Lucifer. From their back and forth, it's clear Lucifer and Constantine have had dealings before. And in particular, Lucifer says something which has had fans of the Arrowverse and Lucifer scratching their heads.
Okay, I'm only doing this because I owe you for Maze.
Maze, or Mazikeen, is a regular character on Lucifer played by Leslie Ann Brandt. She's a demon who used to be the most feared torturer in all of hell. By the end of Part 5, we get no indication of exactly what Constantine did for Maze and Lucifer. Not even Lucifer showrunners Joe Henderson and Ildi Modrovich know what the former monarch of hell was talking about. They told EW the line was as much a surprise to them as it was to the fans. If the issue is ever to be addressed on Lucifer, it will have to be in its upcoming 5th and final season. Otherwise, Lucifer and/or Maze will have to make one more visit to the Arrowverse, or fans will be left to wonder. Early in Part 5 of Crisis, we learn one of the biggest changes in the restored multiverse is that only Supergirl and the other Paragons remember Lex Luthor as being the villain we all know he is. When Supergirl first awakens in the new Earth Prime, she's late to cover Lex being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and we soon learn he's somehow the head of the DEO. Even close allies of Supergirl, like her sister Alex, look up to Lex as some kind of benevolent philanthropist.
He's the best guy.
No, he's not. He's a psychopathic lunatic.
What?
The most likely answer to how this came to be is that it was by Lex's design. Just before Oliver Queen's confrontation with the Anti-Monitor and the formation of the new multiverse, Lex reminds the other Paragons he still has a piece of the Book of Destiny, which he'd previously used to kill the Superman of Earth 96 and take his place. With the remaining pieces of the Book of Destiny, coupled with his own intellect, Lex may have figured a way to consciously will himself into a new role on Earth Prime.
So this is what being a hero feels like. Interesting.
Regardless of how he did it, Jon Cryer's been a hit in his portrayal of one of DC's chief villains. And it's good to know Crisis is unlikely to be the end of his time as Lex Luthor. Toward the end of Part 5, Lois Lane drops a bombshell, and Tyler Hoechlin's Superman seems just as surprised as the rest of us. Lois calls Superman as he's flying through the clouds and tells him he needs to get to Metropolis, saying simply, "It's the boys." Superman dives towards the Earth, presumably on his way home, but we never get to see these boys for ourselves. The last time we left them, Superman and Lois had one child, Jonathan. The newborn lends some much-needed humor to exposition scenes with the Monitor, as he keeps interrupting the alien's portents of doom with his crying. But somehow the restoration of the multiverse has given Lois and Clark at least one more son. This is a departure not only from the pre-Crisis CW, but from the comics. Jonathan is the son of Lois and Clark in the comics, though he's the teenage Superboy and a member of the Legion of Superheroes.
You know, when I used to picture us together, we were always living on Earth, and we had 2 kids.
It's an interesting twist that's sure to cause the pair complications down the road. We'll likely learn who these sons are, how many there are, and whether they've inherited any of their father's abilities either in future episodes of Supergirl or in their own upcoming series, Superman and Lois. In Crisis Part 2, the heroes encounter the earlier version of a cowboy anti-hero they've had dealings with in the past, Jonah Hex, played by Jonathan Sheck. They're confronted by Hex in a mine on Earth 18, where they're looking for a Lazarus pit to resurrect Oliver Queen. Sara Lance and Mia fight and overpower Hex, who, as of yet, doesn't have his trademark scar. When Jonah, restrained by Sara, refuses to yield and give them permission to be in the mine, Sara says, "Guess you were going to get this scar eventually," and cuts into his face with a knife. In the comics, Hex's scar comes comes from a fire, and it doesn't look like an injury that a knife would cause all on its own. If this is actually meant to be the event that marks Jonah Hex for good, the fact that the multiverse essentially gets a big reboot might undo it. Hex doesn't appear at all after part 2 of the event, so as of yet, we have no idea whether or not he still has Sara to thank for his good looks. In Crisis Part 2, Batwoman and Supergirl travel to Earth 99, where they believe they can find the Paragon of Courage, that world's version of Batman. Instead, they find an old, broken Bruce Wayne who's content to let his world and the rest of the multiverse die. We learn at some point this version of Batman crossed the line and killed one of his enemies, after which killing eventually became his default. He even killed the world's version of Superman.
Battle not with monsters, lest you become a monster.
But we never learn what it was that pushed Batman over the edge. We get a few dark details, but they all seem to have happened after he went rogue. He mentions a Batwoman of Earth 99 died, but this looks likely to have happened after Batman went bad, because Bruce says as Kate first became Batwoman because she thought she could succeed where I failed, implying he'd already been corrupted before she even became a hero. His final battle with Superman would be an unlikely source, considering he would have already gone down a much darker road in order to become Superman's target. If we absolutely had to guess, then it seems a good bet it was the Joker who finally drove the Dark Knight to cross the uncrossable line. We know the Clown has brought other versions of Batman close to the brink before. Still, the Bruce Wayne of Earth 99 dies without ever mentioning specifics, so we'll probably never know for sure. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more Looper videos about your favorite movies and TV shows are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.